Vandaag zijn we in Cork, een plaatsje in Ierland waar miljoenen immigranten van vertrokken naar Australië en Barbados. Ze spelen vanaf hun schip en hebben theatervoorstellingen. We gaan kijken wat er eigenlijk allemaal te doen is in Cork vandaag. Kijk met ons mee en veel plezier.
Gravet!
Gravet.
Che gravi?
What gravet?
The bag!
The bag.
Che bag?
What bag?
The handbag!
The handbag.
The handbag. No entiendo.
He no understand.
No. Grab her handbag!
Grab my handbag.
Grab van handbag. No entiendo.
He no understand.
I want that you grab her handbag!
No. Él quiere que tú me robes mi bolsa.
Ahora entiendo. Dame la moneda.
What?
Dame la moneda.
What?
Y la moneda.
Oh no, please. Oh, I need one prince for me.
What?
To protect me.
A prince?
Yes, please.
I want a handbag, no prince! What is
But I need a prince.
Yeah!
Beautiful prince for me. Oh my love. Thank you very much.
Attack that prince!
Que vengas a atacar al príncipe.
Yo príncipe, tengo que atacarlo.
What is the word? He wants you attack.
Oh, he wants to attack me?
Yes.
No problem, no problem.
No problem.
Just one moment, please. Look after my horse, my dear.
Ja, kijkers, terwijl de Ship of Fools een performance geeft op hun boot, ga ik Cork in en kom ik uit bij het Vrouwen Poetry House. Ik ben naar binnen gegaan en heb daar natuurlijk een aantal interviews gedaan. En ik laat ze u graag horen. Kijkers, we zitten hier in Ierland, in het plaatsje Cork. En deze gelegenheid waar we in zitten is het Poetry Centrum voor vrouwen, speciaal voor vrouwen. Er wordt hier van alles georganiseerd en onder andere is hier een tentoonstelling door een vrouwelijke artiest uit Nederland. We spreken met Claire en we gaan het interview doen in het Engels. Hello Claire, Bywater is your name.
Yeah. Hello, welcome.
How did you got a Dutch artist to have an exposition here?
Well, she is living in Galway in the west of Ireland, and she's been working here in Ireland for 6 or 8 years, so she's almost half Irish by now. But she was born in The Hague, and she went to college in Arnhem, and she lived a long time in Utrecht. She travels quite a lot, as you can tell by the rich colours of the paintings behind us. Mm-hmm. And she brings all the colours and memories and things that she sees back to Galway.
This is the first time there's an exposition in this place, I understood.
It's the first time her work has been seen in Cork. She's been exhibiting all over Europe, but in Ireland mostly in small places, in banks, in restaurants, in the Waterford Glass Centre. So we're very honoured to have the chance to be one of her first big exhibitions in a gallery.
You're promoting female artists.
I promote mostly Cork artists, not necessarily female artists, but I also always like to have an international flavour. I always have one show a year that goes abroad. I have one show a year when we show foreign artists. I don't think of Maria van Kampen as being foreign, I think of her as being a local artist. Sorry.
All right. So your position, what are you doing in this place? This is a center created by females, I understood, and many things are being done. What is your position in this community?
Many things are happening here. It's a very creative place. It's always very buzzy and very busy, and there's a lot of young people working here. I share this building with the Poetry Circle. I do the walls. I organise the gallery. I'm the director of the gallery. But we do share projects. We share. We have artists who design book covers, for example, for the publishing house, particularly for poetry books, and that's becoming more and more popular. And the books sell well, they look really good. And when we have poets who are also painters, I try to give them exhibitions as well.
So the whole thing, like the publishing department, I heard that women are being taught here to become a publisher. Why is that?
There was a need for more publishers. The Poetry Circle started publishing women poets because they could not get published because they were women. And this has been going on for nearly 13 years now with Maura Bradshaw, the director here. And now she publishes not only women but all kinds of people. But we're both very committed to helping promote the arts for people who are finding it hard to get launched. So young writers, young artists, people who have started out where the quality is good and they just can't get started. This is where they start.
Because poetry in Ireland is mainly practiced by males.
I think you'd find a lot of people in this building who disagree with you.
Well, that's what I heard. It's like in the pubs, males are proclaiming their poetry, and there's not many females you will find in the pub in the nights and doing their poetry. Is that right?
I think that's probably why it was always hard for the women to get published. Women certainly wouldn't read their poems very much in pubs, but they would read them in places like this. We have a reading every Thursday lunchtime, and there are as many women as there are men. But we're not specific. We're not just a women's circle now. It's very much a poetry circle for everybody.
So the whole thing is like this community is existing like little shops or little businesses within this women's centrum is the umbrella.
Yes, that's right. We did start a publishing course which was for 2 years. It's just about to finish, and we have trained 10 women to become publishers. And we're hoping that we'll get another chance to do the same again. But even before that was started, we've always trained people to be editors, to do the layout for books, so that when a book goes to be published, it literally has to just go through the machine. There is very little that needs to be done to it. So it's very cheap to get it published because all the skills of everything that comes before the printing is done here.
Right.
So the publishing bit is very cheap, which is how we're able to do it.
Claire, you personally, are you an artist?
No, I'm not. I'm an arts administrator. I love working with artists. I find they are... they don't mess about. They don't have another agenda. They know where they're going. If something gets in the way, they just go round it. They go over it. They ignore it. If the funding disappeared tomorrow, which it often has, they don't stop painting. They know where they're going, and I really, really like working with them. I've been working in the arts now. I'm English. I've been in Cork 20 years. I've been involved in the arts here for 19. I've been 4 years in this building.
So you get inspired by the mentality of the strength and the focus and the purpose.
Yes, and I find it very exciting when an artist that I know is producing something new and they're trying an experiment that is working for them and the quality is good. I find this exhibition extremely exciting. I think the colours are absolutely lovely. They're luscious and they're very different. The Cork artists, I know the Cork artists very well, and anybody walking in here would know this wasn't a Cork artist. This is somebody different. This is somebody who's been somewhere else, done something else. She's a Galway artist.
Thank you, Claire. Ja, beste kijkers, en u ziet, dit huis heeft een aantal kleine bedrijven gevestigd. Onder de paraplu van The House of Poetry for Women zit ook een klein bedrijf en dat is Tom's Women's Wear. Ja, en in het vrouwencentrum zit ook een klein winkeltje waar ze specifiek vrouwenkleding ontwerpen. We praten met, what's your name?
Tim O'Sullivan.
Tim, you're making female clothes. I see some beautiful pictures and paintings on the wall. How did you come to make women's clothes?
I originally started off living in Ireland, and then my parents moved to England about 10 years ago. So I ended up in England. Always wanted to do fashion design. Ended up studying there, and then I met Steve in college. And we worked for a couple of years after we finished college, went to Italy, based ourselves in London for a while, and then decided to come back to Ireland because it was a quieter market and really develop ourselves here.
But why women's clothing? I can understand that you make men's clothing in a particular way, but
More interesting.
why?
With men's, you can only do trousers, shirts, jackets. That's it. With women, you can do everything. You can do your wildest creations and do something really simple at the same time.
You have been a fashion designer?
Yeah, worked in Italy for a while. Steve and myself worked as a team for a couple of jeanswear companies, and I did some work with Max Mara as well. And then we worked in London for a lot of the new designers, and then we decided to do our own thing.
So what is your favorite clothing? I mean, what kind of materials do you like to use?
Well, at the moment we're using pure silks, like quite expensive, really good quality silk.
Why don't we catch? Let's see. We catch one dress here.
This is
a
our spring summer collection. From
Actually,
2000.
yeah.
It's made from pure silk organza.
So where do you get your material from? Where is it
London.
coming?
From London, yeah.
And they import it from India?
India and China, I think. Yeah. So we only use the best quality.
So how much is a dress as this? I mean, what is the price? I'm curious.
In Irish pounds, about £360. It's expensive.
Expensive.
But it's good quality.
But you only have one piece of it, huh, I assume?
This is a sample. This is what we would show to buyers for our various shops, and then they may order just 3 pieces, or they may order a full collection or whatever.
So you selling to private people or companies, or how do you do this?
We do private commissions, and we do made to order, especially for people, so it'd be made to their size. But we sell in a shop in Dublin called the Design Centre. We'd have a full range in there, the full range of sizes from 10 to 14.
So how did you get lost in this women poetry center? It's a form of poetry, I must admit, but how did you got here?
It's just looking for office space, looking for studio space in Cork, because the boom in the property market in Ireland, everything became very expensive. And it was just pure luck that we found that they had a studio free here, and it was within our price range, so we took it.
Ja, en naaien mag dan wel een intensieve bezigheid zijn, maar 300 pond, ofwel 900 gulden voor een zijden jurk van eenvoudige afkomst is niet alles. We gaan terug naar The Ship of Fools.
Treasure! Treasure? Where?
With Guinness.
Ja, en terwijl de rest van The Ship of Fools zich uitslooft aan boord, is kapitein August Dirks op bezoek bij een hele bijzondere expositie, namelijk van Miles Davis. De wereldberoemde muzikus, trompetist, maar ook tekenaar en schilder.
It's a great honor to be asked to do this evening. I think it's also highly appropriate that for the Millennium Jazz Festival that we celebrate the other side of one of the great artists, and I use the term in the broadest sense, of the 20th century. Because many who are not necessarily familiar with Miles Davis' music wouldn't necessarily be aware of how important he is in musical terms. He is to this century what Bach was to his particular era. Now, many jazz critics would have said that down through the years, but Davis, I would have come across his music first in 1969, and I was just talking to Andy there a few moments ago, and he reminded me that Abdul Malik from Spain, who's fortunately still with us, designed the sleeve of Bitches Brew. The one thing about Davis, not alone as a musician but as an artist, he always ploughed his own furrow, and he never moved away from it. And some of the bop musicians, the bebop musicians in the 40s, always felt that Davis played that bit slower than they might like. But Miles never did anything he didn't want to do. He had, as any of you are familiar with his career, a remarkable life. But I always like to think of art as being, I think there was an American jazz, or rather art historian, that said there's no such thing as art, there are only artists. And at the end of the day, where would we be without them? Because there's a great meeting of minds with both musicians and artists who can commit paint to canvas, or for that matter shape, sculpture, whatever it may be. But Davis went that mile further, because in 1954 he was recovering from heroin addiction. He had that devil on his back that drove him as a wonderful musician. And I remember listening in 1969 to Bitches Brew, and there's a dear friend of mine who died a number of years later. We were school pals, and he had done, in those days, he had recorded Bitches Brew onto 1/4-inch tape, and we listened to it in his bedroom, and we thought, wow, this guy is something else. He's as close as we could find to Jimi Hendrix. But we didn't realise there were guys doing this in jazz, because we were that bit too young to understand jazz. And then we went back 10 years, and we listened to Kinda Blue from 1959, and we just went, wow. Because we listened to the opening track on that, it's just Miles freeforming. And Miles always freeformed, whether, to my mind anyway, whether it was in his music or in his art, which is self-evident by all the wonderful works that you see here in Gallery 44 this evening. There's not a great deal I can say. I believe that all of us appreciate art.
I'm here with Marcus Connaughton, who's a radio producer for RTE, who has just opened the exhibition of Miles Davis most eloquently, and I feel perhaps he is a man to tell us about the feel of the exhibition, the themes that run through it, and the influences on Miles' life that brought him to the point where he produced the pictures we've seen around here. Marcus, tell me.
I just feel it's a great honour, as I said in my opening remarks this evening, to be asked to even do something like this. I wouldn't have necessarily come to jazz first. I came to rock music like many of my generation. But I would have heard Miles's music for the first time over 30 years ago in 1969 when Bitches Brew came out. I think a lot of people perhaps don't realise that Miles's interaction with somebody like Gil Evans was the one catalyst, I suppose, that made him go on to paint. Because really, when you're working with somebody like Evans, who was a great illustrator in terms of the music, that brought a lot out of Miles. Anybody who's ever listened to Sketches of Spain would just get that. Sketches of Spain is a lot more than an album.
A Sunday morning album, very much so.
Most assuredly. But it's also, it's a painting, a massive painting of so many different colours. And the one thing about Davis's music, it has always been that. There's been lots of colour in there. So it came as no surprise to me when I saw a lot of these paintings for the very first time today, to see the vibrancy, the movement in them. And also, I suppose, the fact that Miles was a collector. Before he began painting himself, he was collecting, he would have collected Magritte, and he's influenced by Magritte anyway, but he also had a Kandinsky, that kind of stuff. So whilst he ploughed his own furrow in terms of what he did musically, he's also obviously done it in terms of the way he paints and the way he draws.
Do you find, as I do, I strangely came to Miles's music through the art. Although, like you, I heard Bitches Brew and was a great fan of Hendrix and saw a lot of that in that kind of music. But I never listened to Miles until I started looking at his pictures. And then I felt, I love the pictures, I'm going to like the guy's music. Do you feel there's a lot of his music in the pictures?
Oh, very much so. I think the two run hand in hand, because any artist, whether they be the conventional sense of a painter or a musician, they're working from a palette in their mind or in their mind's eye. So at the end of the day, it's a form of expression. So the two are inextricably linked. In Miles's case, they're exciting, they're dramatic, they're everything his music was.
But do you find, like I have, that my great heroes were influenced by Miles? I now listen to their music with a completely different ear, having listened to Miles. I suddenly realised just how much he influenced them. And then I look back into these pictures, and I can see Hendrix in the pictures. I can see the Grateful Dead. I can see Jerry Garcia in the pictures. It's all, the symphonies are there almost, and that's what I find. The work is symphonic. There are movements through it. There's a riff. Have you noticed the riff that works?
The word. The riff is the word, I think, all right. It's like any great guitar player. Most people don't understand, or perhaps wouldn't have the insight into the trumpet as a lead instrument. But because of Davis's background, because he was from a middle-class family, his father was a dentist, so he was extremely lucky that as a 13-year-old he got a present of a trumpet, and he took off from there. But as you say, he had that riff, he passed that riff on like a baton to the great marathon runners of jazz, people like Hancock. I mean, Herbie Hancock would acknowledge that he owes a great debt of gratitude to Davis. But other players who played around Davis, like Adderley, Cannonball Adderley, like John Coltrane, any of those guys, certainly would have been moved by his playing, because at times there's almost a heavenly quality, without wanting to get spiritual about this, but quite frankly, if you get a musician who's that talented and who has that depth of feeling, they can take you places that most music can't.
Do you feel like me that he's rather abrogated a lot of the rules? He's saying, this is me, take it. Oh, yeah. I'm not following any rules. Nobody tells me how to draw, nobody tells me how to paint. I'm going my way, and follow me if you want. Well, I think he's not trying to say, I'm trying to please you. He's trying to say, this is my art, accept it. If you can't accept it, too bad.
I think that's a mark of a great artist, both as a musician and as a painter. As an individual, to stay with exactly what they want to do. And there's a certain irony. As I was walking down the street to the gallery this evening, I noticed that they've restored, there's a plaque to the late great Rory Gallagher.
Great guitarist.
Gallagher, not going off the subject, but Gallagher in his own right ploughed that furrow. And Gallagher also painted and drew. Now,
that I didn't know.
But his work has never been seen. Hopefully at some point in the future his work may well be seen. But to come back to Miles, I mean, you look at faces and then you see faces within faces. Again, it's the riff thing. There's a simplicity to what he does, but it's such a difficult thing to make something look that simple. And yet at times he's got layer upon layer upon layer. There's a lovely flow to what he does.
I feel what we got here is, so often you have musicians who paint. I can think of many, but it would be invidious of me to name them, but we're talking celebrity art. I myself feel with Miles that this work stands without it being Miles Davis, trumpeter extraordinaire. If you took away the trumpet, as I said before, you would still have the paintbrush. He is a very, very good artist. His work is powerful without knowing that he's the greatest jazz trumpeter who ever lived. And I think that is an important fact for people to bear in mind. That we're not talking here a famous footballer who's good at golf. We're talking a guy who was in my opinion, top of the tree in two fields. Do you feel
I
that
would
in a
agree.
way?
I mean, he's a great painter. There's no question about that. But I wouldn't be qualified to kind of speak from a painting perspective. But I think, as I said earlier, one of the things I feel that we can all judge paintings. We can all judge music.
Hey, come on! Anyone starts with Hendrix can judge anything.
But if it touches your soul, if it moves you, if it moves your spirit, that's the essence of it. And Davis did that on all those levels, no question.
And I think when you look at this, anyone could say, maybe I don't like it, maybe I don't understand it, but nobody could say the guy couldn't paint, couldn't draw.
No, I mean, the essence of Davis at the end of the day is he's a man who expresses himself and expressed himself. And somebody asked me last night, and they knew I was doing this evening, and they said, when did he die? And I was rooted to the spot because I could not remember when Miles Davis died.
But he hasn't, has he?
No, but what I found peculiar, my response was a lot of years more than I actually thought it was. And then it suddenly dawned on me, a few hours later, he only passed away in 1991.
That's what I say, he hasn't actually died. He may have gone, but Miles Davis is alive to us all, because we only have to look around, we only have to use our ears, and Miles is still there. So to say he's died is a bit premature.
But he also had a huge influence on music in Britain. People like Ian Carr, people like Mayall. John Mayall would have been a fan of what he was doing. Clapton was a fan of what Miles Davis was at. Carlos Santana was a guy who was into what Davis was at. I think Carlos Santana was introduced to Abdul Malik through the work that Malik did for Bitches Brew when he did that record sleeve.
He did the Santana covers.
So there are so many, I suppose, if you delve into the career of somebody with the kind of opus, the magnificent work that he had, particularly from a recorded point of view, there are so many tangents then that go off that. But he's left a considerable legacy. To my mind, he is certainly in the top 5 of the great artists of the 20th century.
Oh, come on, let's call it 3.
Oh, top 3, yeah, why not? Both in music and in art.
Wonderful, thanks a lot, Marcus.
Cheers.